Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. Back to our question about microfinancing. How do we move it forward?
Well, I think one of the major problems of why microfinance failed, or why it's fledgling, and why it didn't actually succeed, is because you would have seen that a lot of microfinance banks were actually set up in cities. If you take an average of where the location of the microfinance bank, I mean, in Lagos, you have thousands of microfinance banks, but in some village in Akoko Edo or Egboko, you have very few. Where do you think microfinance banks should be really located? They should be located where micro level activities are happening. So in the first place, there should have been a special distribution of microfinance banks. The regulations should have taken cognizance of geographical spread and devolution. You see, and that's where you will actually get, you see, because you don't have to operate within a large purse. You get my point. A microfinance bank, maybe if you have 200 million, you can run a good show with that, 150 million. And in some decent local government, no matter how poor, in any local government in Nigeria, you should be able to generate an economy of 200 million in the private sector. Or let's say 100 million in the private sector. So 100 million by how many local governments? 774. How much is that? 774 times 100 million. How many billions is that? Just in the private sector, in the localities alone.
That's huge.
That is huge. Even outside the budget that people are fighting to kill themselves over.
Because actually that would have actually helped if we had done what we were supposed to have done with the manufacturing sector. It goes back to education we just highlighted earlier on, and trying to look at the system we had in place when we had a 6-3-3-4 system of education, and we thought that vocational training, which is evident in some of the schools like polytechnics, can be groomed from the first 3 years of high school, so that when you come out of that institution, if you decide to stop and not to go beyond your first 3 years, you can now be said to have had education for self-reliance, and we missed that point. Now that we're getting to see all of this, now we're having a projection of what we're likely to see in the years to come, that Nigeria just might be one of the big powerhouses, economically speaking. What can we do to rejig that system? Because that system is still there, but as you put it, it looks to us that we're just going to school or having a system for the sake of having a system.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I don't like reinventing the wheel. It's no point. And there are some states and there are some places that have done it. In the first place, make sure it's certificated, right? From GS1 to GS3. Make it put a part of the integral curriculum. Make sure it's certificated. In those days, you would have City and Guilds. You have something called a certificate called City and Guilds. It's a British certification. And that used to be the heartthrob of the construction industry and the manufacturing sector in Nigeria in those days. You could certify it. That's one. Then the second thing is that Lagos State is a very good model. Go to the Ministry of Education in Lagos State. Go and see the commissioner there, and she will tell you the model they are using. DFID has supported Lagos State, for example, in working on the what do you call it, MATV. It's something that Fashola launched. It has to do with technical and vocational skills. So they're having model sites for these technical and vocational skills. It's still early days, but they're trying to streamline it with the schools. So what each state should do is to make sure that the Ministry of Education has a component that is working squarely on skills acquisition and the certification thereof. And you make sure that the trainers too, right, you also have trainers who are keyed into the Ministry of Education, just as you have regular teachers. And these trainers can come from the industry, from the streets.
Because having certification for the GS3 examination would help a lot.
Absolutely.
And that is why some, even though you can't possibly go beyond that, you just want to manage and see yourself through, and at the end of the day you have nothing to show for it. Look at Lagos and so many other cities now. It's been populated by handsmen from neighboring countries like Cotonou.
I'll tell you something about Lagos. Lagos is going to go into a construction boom, right, in the next 15-20 years. The Atlantic City is going to be there. The constructions in Lagos are going to do that. There's going to be slum rehabilitation. Even you and I that own either apartments or buildings or are renting something, we're going to do some renovation and things like that. Do you know how many skills will be required to be able to sustain that? Do you know how many artisans will be required to sustain that? So that in itself is going to boom. You get my point? So that certification is one thing. Another thing is the mindset. People have to see that, because after the certification I can go out, I can do stuff, I can either in construction, anywhere. Also, it's good to put a business studies course there so people can employ themselves, if you know what I mean.
And that's where the entrepreneurial...
You put some entrepreneurial skills.
Well, we need that in our curriculum in different schools, as a matter of fact,
Yes,
but that seems to be absent.
Well, people look at it as business studies. That's what I'm saying. You see, people just reel out a list of subjects for students to go and learn in school, as if to say, just tick the boxes and get away.
Some of them are not that relevant
But
anymore.
some of them, you have to be able to compartmentalize, or at least design. You have to ask yourself the question, right? Is this subject, are they for the students, or are the students for the subjects? You want to produce something. The major resource that Nigeria has is the human resource, nothing more. All this oil, gold, the illusions, this is the human resource. And if we don't concentrate on that and train them and cause them to become what we want them to become, fit for purpose and fit for our future, then we may be losing out on something. So there are examples around for that.
Because in Europe and even America, most of these handsmen are not graduates. And if we had been able to harness all of that system here in the country, you have a plumber, a carpenter who's passed through school with such kind of training. He does better than the one who never went through all of that. But we missed out on all of that. And we saw the equipment then in schools before some of us left school. Most of them, they had a laboratory. I think then they called Introductory Technology Laboratory. And no one ever passed through that because there was no certification for the first 3 years, let alone when you finally leave at the end of the 3 years.
Yes. But I'll tell you where the problem is. It is beyond that. It is at a level above that. You see, we have a failing, and our failing is twofold. We haven't been able to manage our population.
Which is our strength.
Yes, you have to manage the population. Then not only manage the population, you have to manage the diversity. You see, you have to manage the fact that different people, different talents, put them in the place to do exactly what they know how to do best. And you have a multiplier effect that shoots the country. And that is why the population, in terms of its size, is an asset for Nigeria. The diversity, in terms of its complexity, is another asset. What it takes for us as Nigerians to be able to manage our population well, to be able to manage our diversity well, putting talents where they should be. But like I would say, if I had the opportunity to tell anyone, I would say you do what great leaders do. You don't lose hope, and you don't throw away faith.
And it's at that point to live it. Food for thought for everyone. Sina Fagbenro-Byron is the Southwest Coordinator, Regional Coordinator of the Department for International Development. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Ed. Okay, we'll be back after this break. Please join us again.